The very first thing I did after being reborn before the apocalypse was drain my entire life savings to buy an underground mall that had been abandoned for 10 years. Everyone said I was crazy. Even the real estate agent mocked me for being an idiot. The construction foreman stood in front of the pitch-black entrance, unable to hold back his question. Boss, even rats wouldn't want to live in this hellhole. What did you buy it for? I just smiled faintly and didn't explain. Because I was the only one who knew that in exactly 7 days, the apocalypse would descend. When that time comes, a massive blizzard will blanket the globe, and it won't be just any ordinary snow. The snow will carry a strange type of spore. Once it makes contact with bare skin, or enters the body through wounds, the mouth, or the nose, mild cases will suffer high fevers and comas, while severe cases will completely lose their minds, turning into infected monsters that only know how to attack the living. And that is merely the beginning of the end. After the blizzard strikes, global temperatures will plummet to minus 30 degrees Celsius, then minus 50, and finally stabilize at below minus 80 degrees. Following that, the power grid will collapse, communications will be cut off, and the city's heating systems will completely shut down. The once bustling and prosperous surface will turn into a living purgatory in just a few short days. By then, money will be nothing but scrap paper, and gold and silver will lose all their value. The only things that can actually save lives will be hot water, food, medicine, and fuel. A single cup of hot water could be traded for a gold ring. A single pack of rations could force those who once stood high and mighty to throw away all their dignity. A bag of coal would be more than enough to make people in the same building slaughter each other. And this underground mall that everyone despised would become the final sanctuary for the entire city. In my previous life, I died on the 6th day after the great snowstorm hit. Back then, I risked my life to protect my fiancée, Lin Yue. I gave her my last winter coat, let her have the last sip of hot soup, and even braved the blizzard, walking 3 whole kilometers just to find her a box of fever reducers. But in the end, she was the one who opened the door to our safe house and told everything about the supplies I had hoarded for half a year too. That bastard, Zhu Yan. That night, Zhu Yan brought over a dozen survivors and stormed into my safe house. They robbed my coal, robbed my medicine, and robbed me of every hope of survival. As for Lin Yue, wearing the winter coat I traded my life for, she stood behind Zhu Yan and looked at me coldly. Lu Chen, don't blame me. There are only so many supplies. It's better for me to follow him than to stay here and freeze to death with you. After that, she shoved me out the door. The minus 80-degree cold slammed right into my face. I didn't lose consciousness immediately. I could still hear them from behind the door, the sound of them opening canned food, and I heard Zhu Yan sneering. For a piece of trash like him to have survived this long, he was already pretty damn lucky. Lin Yue didn't argue with him at all. She just let out a soft chuckle. At that moment, I finally understood. The coldest thing in the apocalypse was never the snow. It was the human heart. When I opened my eyes again, I had returned to 7 days before the blizzard struck. On my phone screen, the text message Lin Yue sent was still displayed. Lu Chen, my mom said it already. Marriage requires a sense of security. Hurry up and transfer the house to my name. We're going to be family sooner or later anyway. Don't tell me you can't even show this little bit of sincerity. Staring at these few lines of text, I slammed my phone face down on the table. In my past life, just to give her that so-called sense of security, I transferred the house my parents left me into her name. And the result? When the apocalypse hit, she used that very house as bait to trade for Zhu Yan's protection. In this life, she still has the nerve to demand my house? Keep dreaming. I grabbed the property deed and headed straight to the bank. 3 hours later, the house was successfully mortgaged. Next, I liquidated all my stocks, mutual funds, and even sold off the commercial properties my parents left behind. Even my car and a few valuable collectibles, I sold them all off at dirt cheap prices. In the end, I scraped together a total of over 80 million yuan. Before the apocalypse, this money would have been enough for me to live an incredibly luxurious life. But in 7 days, money will be nothing more than a pile of scrap paper. I wasn't in a rush to buy supplies because I knew very well that no matter how much stuff you have, if you don't have a safe place to store it, you're just serving it up on a silver platter for someone else. So immediately, I contacted the owner of the abandoned underground mall in the suburbs. I had looked into the legal status of this place in my past life. It was unbelievably clean. No mortgages, no debt disputes, and no messy ownership entanglements. Its only problem was that the location was too remote, and it had been vacant for too long, so absolutely, no one wanted to take it over. That area was originally an underground commercial street built 10 years ago. Later, due to poor business, it was left abandoned. The surface entrance was dilapidated, the underground was cold and damp, and there was barely any foot traffic around. In the eyes of others, it was just a massive money pit asking for trouble. But I knew it had a 3-story deep underground space, thick retaining walls, a complete ventilation system, and even an independent water well. More importantly, it had a core structure converted from an air raid shelter, the ventilation ducts, drainage system, and part of the backup power grid were still intact. What I needed to do wasn't to build from scratch, but to seal and reinforce the existing foundation and restore its operations. With just a little renovation, it would be a natural survival fortress. The moment the owner heard I wanted to buy it, his eyes instantly lit up. "Young man, are you sure you want to buy that hellhole?" "Positive. Back in the day, it cost over 50 million yuan to build this place. If you're genuinely willing to take it off my hands, then 8 million. I'll transfer the property rights and the underground parking lot to you right now. 5.8 million. The owner froze for a second. I continued, "We signed the contract today, and I transfer the money today." He stayed silent for a few seconds, then immediately slapped his thigh. Deal. To him, that underground mall had been abandoned for 10 years. The annual maintenance fees and accumulated debts were like a chunk of rotting flesh stuck to his body. Now that someone was willing to be the fall guy, he couldn't wait to stay up all night just to shove the keys into my hands. After signing the contract, the 5.8 million yuan was wired directly. The way the owner looked at me, it was like he was looking at a total moron. But little did he know, in 7 days, let alone 5.8 million, even if he offered an entire skyscraper in the city center in exchange, I still wouldn't trade this underground bunker. Once the contract was settled, I immediately found a construction crew. I had only one demand. Within 7 days, they had to turn this underground mall into a genuine Doomsday fortress. Basement level 1, converted into a power room and a defensive buffer zone. Basement level 2, converted into a warehouse area, a cold storage vault, and a medical supply room. Basement level 3, converted into the living quarters. The entrance was to be fitted with 3 layers of riot-proof alloy doors. The corridors needed isolation grids and electromagnetic lock doors. All windows leading outside were to be completely sealed off. The ventilation ducts required an air filtration and anti-backflow system. Surveillance cameras had to cover every single blind spot. When the construction foreman heard my demands, his face turned pale. "Boss, are you renovating a mall or building a fallout shelter?" I looked at him. "Am I paying you enough?" More than enough. As long as the money's in hand, let alone a fallout shelter, I'll build you an underground palace." I immediately wired a 500,000 yuan deposit. Seeing the deposit notification, the doubt on the foreman's face instantly turned into eager hospitality. "Don't you worry, boss. I guarantee it'll be done in 7 days." After sorting out the underground fortress renovations, I officially began my supply sweep. Food, water, daily necessities, fuel, thermal gear, life-saving equipment. As long as it was needed for the apocalypse, I bought it all. I bought fuel by the ton, stockpiled medicine by the crate, and hoarded food by the warehouse. Security camera systems and protective gear, I bought them clean out, especially salt, antibiotics, fever reducers, and disinfectants. In 7 days, a small pinch of salt would be enough to make countless people bash each other's heads in. A box of antibiotics in the apocalypse was literally a second life. I bought out a batching frozen meat that supermarkets had canceled orders for. From beef and lamb chops, to chicken thighs and frozen shrimp, and other frozen foods, all of them had quarantine certificates. Just because the orders were abruptly canceled, they were piled up, stuffing the cold storage full. When the manager saw me demanding 20 truckloads in one breath, his eyes lit up. "Brother, are you sure you're taking it all? Here's the money. With this much stock, do you even have a place to store it?" I nodded. "I've already got the cold storage prepped." He had no idea. To him, this was just offloading dead inventory. But to me, this was my lifeline for years to come. After the blizzard hits, the city's power will be cut, supermarkets will be looted clean, and transportation will be completely paralyzed. By then, even half a piece of frozen meat would be enough for people to risk their lives. At 8 p.m., 20 refrigerated trucks drove into the underground mall, one after another. Box after box of beef, lamb chops, chicken thighs, frozen shrimp, and packaged foods were hauled into the cold storage. The construction crew stared in absolute shock. The foreman couldn't help but ask, "Boss, are you planning to open a massive supermarket or something? Are you opening a massive supermarket?" Something like that. They had no idea that in 7 days, supermarkets would be reduced to rubble. Cold storages would become bloodbaths of contention, and this underground fortress beneath my feet would become the safest place in the entire city. Over the next few days, the once dark and damp mall was completely reborn. The power room, storage area, medical bay, and living quarters were fully zoned out. The diesel generators, battery banks, and fuel storage were wired into an independent power grid. Even if the city's power grid completely collapsed, we would still have normal electricity here. The living quarters on basement level 3 were also redesigned exactly to my liking. Bedrooms, a kitchen, a medical room, a gym, a surveillance room, and a greenhouse. Nothing was missing. The water circulation and air filtration systems ran smoothly, and I even set up a small living room. I wasn't just going to survive, I was going to live comfortably. I had suffered far too much in my past life. Those moldy scraps of bread, those frozen puddles of dirty water, Those leftovers that people fought tooth and nail for. I never wanted to touch any of that again for the rest of my life. On the evening of the final countdown day, the construction crew finished installing the last riot-proof door. The foreman patted the heavy door, looking incredibly smug as he said, "Boss Lou, you can rest easy with this door. Let alone a normal person. Even if you rammed a car into it, it wouldn't break." I looked at the thick alloy door and nodded in satisfaction. Of course, a car wouldn't break it. But after tonight, the things trying to break down this door might not be cars anymore. After I paid off the remaining balance, the entire construction crew left. The massive riot-proof door slowly closed. With a heavy clank, this entire underground mall was officially completely isolated from the outside world. I stood in the surveillance room, watching dozens of monitors light up simultaneously. The main entrance, the backup corridors, the ventilation shafts, the underground parking lot, and even the surrounding streets. I had secretly installed cameras on the streetlights, behind abandoned utility poles, and behind billboards. As for the camera access of a few nearby stores, I had already bribed my way into them beforehand. Right now, all the footage was displayed clear as day right in front of my eyes. The underground fortress was 100% complete, and all the supplies had been moved into storage. Down in the basement level 2 storage area, rows of shelves stood silently under the lights. Rations, canned goods, compressed dry food, medicine, tools, protective gear, and emergency rescue equipment. Everything was sealed tight in its designated zone. Every door was fitted with both electromagnetic and mechanical locks, and every single corridor was under surveillance. I held the checklist, going over every item one by one. Food, water, medicine, fuel, heating systems, air filtration, and defense systems, everything was ready. Right at that moment, my phone rang. Caller ID, Lin Yue. The second I answered, her impatient voice immediately blared out. "Lu Chen, what is the meaning of this? I texted you, why didn't you reply? My mom said it already. If you don't transfer the house, then the wedding is off. Also, I heard from Zhu Yan that you mortgaged the house. Are you out of your mind? That's supposed to be our marital home." I replied flatly. "Lin Yue, that's the house my parents left me. What does it have to do with you?" Her voice suddenly shrieked. "Lu Chen, are you seriously being this petty with me right now? I'm your fiancé. You're a man, yet you're too stingy to even give up a single house, and you still have the nerve to say you love me." If it were the me from my past life, hearing those words, I definitely would have panicked and apologized. I would have explained, coaxed her, and trampled on my last shred of dignity. But right now, I just found it laughable. "Lin Yue, didn't you want a sense of security?" Her tone finally softened a bit. "That's more like it. So tomorrow you..." I cut her off. "Go find Zhu Yan. He's got plenty of sense of security for you." The other end of the line went dead silent. A few seconds later, Lin Yue furiously shrieked. "Lu Chen, are you sick in the head? How dare you talk to me like that? Do you believe I'll cancel the wedding right this second?" "Cancel it," I said coldly. "And while you're at it, tell your mom. I'm not giving a single dime for the bride price either. As for the wedding photoshoot money, make sure you pay me back my half." With that, I hung up straight away. The next second, Lin Yue's text flooded in. "Lu Chen, you're dead meat. It's not too late to apologize right now. Let me tell you, I have plenty of guys chasing after me. Zhu Yan is way more understanding than you. Don't you dare regret this." I looked at that last message and locked my phone screen. Regret? In 7 days, the ones regretting will be you bastards. At midnight, the wind suddenly picked up outside the window. I walked over to the surveillance monitors. On the streets, pedestrians were still laughing and chatting. Food delivery drivers zipped by on their e-bikes. Convenience stores were still brightly lit, and roadside barbecue stalls were billowing with smoke. This entire city was still immersed in a peaceful, quiet night, just like any other. No one knew that the countdown had already ended. At 12:01 a.m., the very first snowflake slowly drifted down from the sky. It landed on the back of the hand of a drunkard by the road. The drunkard paused. "What the hell is with this weather? Why is it suddenly snowing?" I switched the camera to high-definition mode and zoomed in. The next second, his body stiffened, and pitch-black veins bulged out from his skin. His eyes began to glaze over, and a bizarre, guttural growl erupted from his throat. Immediately after, he lunged like a maniac at a passerby next to him. An ear-piercing scream tore through the night on the street corner. The snow fell heavier and heavier, and the entire street descended into absolute chaos. Some people frantically brushed the snow off their bodies, some turned and ran for their lives, and some tried to hide in convenience stores, only to find the entrances already jam-packed with people. In just a few short minutes, the whole block spiraled out of control, and the surveillance monitors shook violently. Very quickly, all that remained on the snow were chaotic footprints and glaringly bright red bloodstains. At this very moment, the entire city officially plunged into darkness. Meanwhile, I was sitting in my warm underground fortress, holding a freshly cooked bowl of beef noodles. The broth was piping hot, the beef melted in my mouth, and the fragrant scent of scallions even lingered in the air. I watched the chaotic street scenes on the monitors, feeling no sense of gloating in my heart, only the heavy, quiet realization that the other shoe had finally dropped. The apocalypse had officially begun. I wasn't in a rush to turn off the cameras, because I knew very well that the true cruelty was only just beginning. For the first 10 minutes, most people still thought this was just a sudden disaster, just extreme weather, was just some temporary glitch. But 20 minutes later, the first group of infected completely lost control. They didn't fear the cold, didn't feel pain, and had no reason left. The moment they heard the sound of the living, they were instantly drawn to it. On the surveillance monitors, the city's lights flickered out block by block, until nothing was left but the overwhelming blizzard and the agonizing screams echoing from afar. The city's cell service wasn't completely dead yet. Some cell towers were still running on backup power, making the signal spotty at best. Nobody knew how much longer it would hold up, and because of that, the messages in the birthday group chat kept popping up line after line. What the hell is going on outside? Why is it suddenly snowing? People are going crazy. The hotel entrance is a total mess. Hurry up and call the cops. I can't get through to the police. Lu Chen, did you know something was going to happen? The one who sent that was Zhou Yin. He was still the same as always. Whenever danger struck, his first thought was never to take responsibility, but to find a scapegoat. Right after, Lin Yuewei started calling me on voice chat. I didn't pick up. She called again, and I still ignored it. After 5 missed calls in a row, she finally sent a text. Lu Chen, where are you? Something bad is happening outside. Come pick me up right now. I'm at the Jinyu Hotel. It's full of maniacs out there. Are you even listening to me? I looked at the screen, my expression completely calm. Jinyu Hotel. Just like in my previous life, her birthday party was still being held there. Only in this life, I didn't show up. I replied with just 2 words, not free. The moment the text was sent, Lin Yuewei replied almost instantly. Lu Chen, what is that supposed to mean? I'm your fiancé. It's so dangerous right now, and you have the nerve to say you're not free. Are you even a man? Even though the apocalypse had already begun, she still thought I'd be exactly the same as before, that with just 1 word from her, I'd immediately risk my life to rush over and save her. I texted back, the wedding is off. You are no longer my fiancé. The other end went silent for a few seconds. Right after, a crazy barrage of texts bombarded me. Lu Chen, you're insane. Is this really the time to throw a tantrum? Something huge is actually happening outside. Come pick me up right now. As long as you come, I can forgive your attitude today. Seeing that line, I almost burst out laughing. Forgive me? Even at a time like this, she still thinks she's doing me a favor. I didn't bother replying anymore, and switched straight to the external camera system I'd hooked up earlier. There was one camera that perfectly captured the street around the Jinyu Hotel. The feed was a bit laggy, but it was enough to clearly see the chaos unfolding at the hotel entrance. Several cars had smashed into each other, shattered glass littered the ground, and the lobby was packed with people. Some were trying to rush out, while others were trying to hide inside. Soon enough, through the window of the second-floor banquet hall, I spotted Lin Yuewei. She was wearing a white evening gown, her elaborate makeup more than half smudged, holding her phone, crying while constantly peering outside. And right beside her, Zhou Yan was pushing hard to barricade the door. A few of our former mutual friends were there too, all of them pale as ghosts. It was this exact group of people who, when I was shoved out of the shelter, didn't say a single word to help me. Now they were finally getting a taste of true fear. I closed the group chat and started checking the underground fortress's systems. Power, normal. Heating, normal. Air filtration, normal. Water purification system, normal. External cameras, normal. The 3 layers of riot doors were securely locked. In the power room on basement level 1, the diesel generator had automatically kicked in. Its low rumble carried through the thick walls like a strong, steady heartbeat. The room temperature was 24 degrees Celsius. The outside temperature was negative 36 degrees Celsius, and that number was still dropping. I knew that by noon today at the latest, the outside temperature would plummet past negative 80 degrees Celsius. By then, let alone ordinary people, even vehicles would be frozen solid and unable to start. The true freezing hell hadn't even arrived yet. When I woke up on the second day, it was already 9 a.m. I immediately turned on the central surveillance monitors. The outside world had completely changed. The entire city was buried under heavy snow, the streets littered with smashed and mangled cars. Roadside billboards had cracked from the extreme cold, dangling precariously in midair, ready to fall. The front of the convenience store was a trashed, chaotic mess. A few infected were moving sluggishly through the snow. The moment they heard even the slightest sound, their heads would snap up, searching for the direction of the living. I glanced at the outdoor temperature, negative 72 degrees Celsius. It was dropping even faster than in my previous life. Just then, the underground fortress's external intercom suddenly let out a sharp beep. Someone was approaching the mall entrance. I adjusted the camera angle and saw 3 men wrapped in thick cotton blankets, their faces tightly bound in scarves, their hands tucked deep into their sleeves, with barely anything showing but their eyes. They were battling the blizzard, stumbling toward the entrance. I recognized one of the three guys. It was Wang Hai, the property manager of the nearby apartment complex. In the early days of the apocalypse in my previous life, he had gathered the survivors from several surrounding apartment buildings. On the surface, he flew the flag of mutual aid, but behind their backs, he robbed people of plenty of supplies. People like him were even more terrifying than the infected monsters. Right now, Wang Hai was violently pounding on the door of the mall. Is anyone there? Open the door. We're freezing to death out here. There's someone inside, right? Open the door and let us in. I didn't say a word, just quietly watched the screen. Wang Hai banged on it for a long time, and seeing no movement from inside, he instantly changed his tune. I know there's someone in there. Wasn't there construction going on here just a few days ago? Hurry up and open the damn door. These are special times. Resources must be shared. Hearing that line, I finally turned on the external PA system. A burst of static crackled, followed by my voice, echoing from the speaker outside the door. Based on what? Wang Hai jumped, his head snapping up to look at the camera. Who the hell are you? Then, as if remembering something, you're that idiot from a few days ago, who bought this underground mall. Do you still think I'm an idiot now? Wang Hai was speechless. The two guys next to him looked at the brand new camera above the door, then at the heavy riot door, and their expressions instantly shifted. They knew this place had been renovated ahead of time. The trucks that kept driving into the mall over the past few days gave them a vague idea of what was inside. There was electricity, sturdy doors, heat, and supplies. Wang Hai immediately softened his tone. Brother Liu, we're all locals from around here. It's so dangerous outside right now. You can't just leave us to die, right? Just let us in to warm up a bit. Don't worry, we won't stay for free. We can all guard this place together later. Wouldn't that be better? Liu Chen, don't be so selfish. With things like this outside, does it make sense for you to hog such a huge place all to yourself? I wasn't angered by him in the slightest, and just calmly replied, I can point you in the right direction. 300 meters to the east is a community hospital. The walls there are thick enough, and there are plenty of doors. You can take shelter from the cold there for now. 500 meters. Further north is an entrance to an underground parking lot. It's much easier to get into than here. If you run now, you'll still make it. If you keep banging on the door, you'll only attract the monsters. But Wang Hai wasn't listening at all. He pointed straight at the camera and cursed, Don't try to bullshit me. You just want to chase us away, don't you? Just wait until the government rescue team gets here. I'll report your ass first. I looked at the increasingly raging blizzard behind them, my voice growing a few degrees colder. Then you'd better try to stay alive until the rescue team arrives. The moment I finished speaking, a low growl echoed from the distance. Wang Hai and his two goons froze simultaneously. On the surveillance monitor, a few crooked silhouettes stumbled out from the street corner. They were covered in ice and snow, their pupils pitch black. Wang Hai's voice instantly turned into a shrill, desperate shriek. Liu Chen, open the door. Hurry up and open the door. I didn't open the door, because I knew very well, the moment I opened that first door, what followed would be countless, dangers rushing in. The outer buffer zone hadn't finished its sterilization process yet. Anyone rushing and carrying the spores from the snow could destroy this entire fortress. I'll say this one last time. Run now, and you'll still make it. With that, I turned off the PA system. Outside the door, Wang Hai was frantically pounding away, but the riot door didn't budge an inch. The next second, several dark figures lunged through the blizzard, and the camera feed shook violently. I stopped watching. Not because I was soft-hearted, but because I knew. The apocalypse had already given its answer. Just because you scream the loudest doesn't mean others are obligated to risk their lives to save you. And just because you try to guilt-trip them doesn't mean others have to hand over their lifeline to you. 12 p.m. Outdoor temperature, -86 degrees Celsius. The heavy snow was still pouring down, the entire city seemingly buried under a thick layer of ice and snow. There was barely a living soul left on the streets, only the infected monsters wandering aimlessly through the snow. Their movements were stiffer than last night, but their hearing seemed even sharper. A car alarm suddenly went off, and less than 10 seconds later, over a dozen dark figures nearby turned their heads in unison, charging straight toward the source of the sound. I watched the scene unfold, my brows furrowing slightly. Just as I remembered, these monsters infected by the snow spores would continuously evolve. On the first day, they'd be attracted by loud noises. From the third day onward, they'd become more sensitive to subtle sounds and heat sources. After 7 days, mutants would even start appearing, ones that could climb and smash through doors. That meant my underground fortress absolutely had to pass this first test within these 7 days. And then, that test arrived very quickly. 2 p.m. On the surveillance monitor, at the far end of the street outside the mall, a group of people appeared. There were over 20 of them, men and women, some supporting the injured, others carrying luggage. They must have fumbled their way here. From the underground parking garage of the nearby apartment complex, they were wrapped in all sorts of puffer jackets, cotton blankets, plastic raincoats, and even curtains. Their faces were tightly wrapped in scarves, and they had clear plastic sheets covering their eyes, hastily cut from whatever they could find. Even bundled up like that, their eyebrows and eyelashes were still caked in ice and snow. On the necks and backs of the hands of a few, abnormal black spots had even started to appear. Snowmelt was seeping in through the gaps in their clothes, and the one leading them was none other than Wang Hai. He had actually survived. Only, his eyes were even more crazed now than they were this morning. Beside him were a few young guys, gripping iron pipes, wrenches, and even fire axes. Clearly, they weren't here to beg for help. They were here to break down the door. I turned on the outdoor PA system. Stop right there. The sound boomed from the front speaker. The crowd instantly froze. Get the hell out of here. We're not taking anyone in. Someone in the crowd immediately started wailing loudly. How can you be so cruel? Would it kill you to let us in to warm up a bit? You're hogging this huge place all to yourself. Aren't you afraid of karma? Wang Hai seized the opportunity and shouted. You all heard him. He clearly has a shelter, supplies, and even heating equipment. But he absolutely refuses to let us in. Clinging to private property at a time like this, you're completely inhuman. I quietly watched him. I had to admit, Wang Hai really knew how to rile people up. He knew he couldn't get in on his own, so he tied everyone else to his cause. As long as I didn't open the door, I'd become the villain in the eyes of the mob. Too bad that trick was useless against me now. I spoke up. First, this underground mall belongs to me. Second, this place isn't equipped for mass quarantine. Third, some of you are already showing black spots. If you force your way in, you'll drag everyone down with you. Fourth, the louder the noise outside, the easier it is to attract the infected. I repeated the route one more time. 300 meters to the east is the community hospital. 500 meters to the north is the underground parking lot. If you want to live, then before they gather around, get the hell out of here right now. This was the final warning I could give. But Wang Hai was clearly not satisfied. He sneered. Don't listen to him. He's just saying that to trick us into leaving. There's definitely a ton of supplies inside. As long as we all rush him together, he won't dare keep the door shut. A few young guys immediately charged forward, gripping their iron pipes and fire axes, and viciously smashed them against the outer iron door. Bang! 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 The deafening crashes echoed far and wide down the empty street. I gave my final warning. Stop banging. The noise will draw the infected here. But Wang Hai acted like he was deaf and instead yelled even louder. Everyone, shout together. Make him open the door. He won't dare just watch us die. The crowd, riled up by him, joined in. Open the door. Open the door. Open the door. Chant after chant, carried far into the blizzard. I didn't bother trying to talk sense into them anymore, and just switched the surveillance feed to look at both sides of the street. Sure enough, in the distance, a few wandering infected monsters slowly raised their heads. Then the second one, the third, the fifth. More and more dark figures emerged from the snowy veil, turning around. They heard it. Wang Hai was still screaming. Lu Chen, if you don't open the door, you're murdering everyone here. I leaned back in my chair, looking at him calmly. The one who brought them here is you. The very next second, the first dark figure lunged out from the street corner. Someone in the crowd shrieked in terror, and the scene instantly descended into chaos. The men who were aggressively banging on the door just moments ago immediately dropped their tools and turned to run. Some tripped and fell, some dragged and trampled over each other, and some screamed as they bolted into the blizzard. Wang Hai's face turned deathly pale, and he spun around to flee. But he had barely taken 2 steps when a man grabbed him tight. Wang Hai, you said we could get in here. Don't you dare run. Let go of me. You were the one stupid enough to follow. What the fuck does that have to do with me? The moment those words left his mouth, the expressions of everyone around him changed, but they didn't have time to be angry anymore. The blizzard and the chaos quickly swallowed the scene outside the door. I sat in the surveillance room without moving an inch, and I didn't open the door, because I knew very well, if I went soft now, the one who'd end up dead would definitely be me. A few minutes later, the outside of the door returned to dead silence. The heavy snow was still falling. Scattered across the ground were iron pipes, cotton blankets, and a few shoes. The survivors had scattered and fled. Wang Hai was nowhere to be seen either. I didn't know if he had escaped, or if he had been swallowed by the blizzard. I turned off the external broadcasting system, then zoomed in on the front door security camera, confirming the outer defenses were completely intact. Excellent. The first wave of attacks, and the underground fortress remains completely unscathed. Right then, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Lin Yue. It was Zhu Yan. Lu Chen, I know exactly where you are. The underground mall, right? You just wait. We're heading there right now. It seems the news about the underground mall has already reached Zhou Yan. Whether it was Wang Hai running his mouth, or Lin Yue telling him, it doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that they've finally set their sights on me. But in this life, the doors are in my hands, the supplies are in my hands, and the only way to survive is in my hands. I slowly typed out a single reply. Come on over, I'll be waiting. After hitting send, I pulled up the map. Jinhue Hotel is less than a kilometer away from the underground mall as the crow flies, with an abandoned pedestrian tunnel in between. In the past, it would only take a few minutes to drive here, but now, this 1 kilometer stretch is filled with a raging blizzard, freezing starvation, the infected, and out-of-control mobs. If they want to crawl their way to me alive, it won't be that easy. At 3 p.m., the perimeter cameras facing Jinhue Hotel finally caught a few blurry silhouettes. The blizzard was too heavy. I couldn't see every part of the road clearly. Sometimes they'd appear on the intersection cameras, and sometimes they'd vanish into the snow. Zhou Yan was leading Lin Yue and a few mutual friends, trudging painfully toward the underground mall. They were wrapped in thick cotton quilts, dragged out of the hotel's storage, along with tablecloths and plastic raincoats. Their faces were bundled in bedsheets and scarves, and their limbs were haphazardly wrapped in plastic wrap, duct tape, and trash bags. Even with all that protection, every time they reappeared on the monitors, their numbers had dwindled. Some couldn't walk anymore and had to stay behind in roadside shops. Some chose to hide in parking garages and never caught up again. By the time they neared their destination, the original dozen or so people had been reduced to 7. Lin Yue was being dragged along by Zhou Yan, her face as pale as a sheet. She used to care so much about her image. She wouldn't step outside without full makeup and would throw a fit if her shoes got a little dusty. But now, she was covered in filthy blood, her messy hair plastered to her face, looking as pathetic as a refugee. I sat in the monitoring room, watching silently, without a single ounce of pity. In my past life, I had crawled step by step through the snow just like that. Except back then, I braved the wind and snow to find medicine for her. But in this life, she came here to beg me to open the door. Soon enough, a few staggering dark figures appeared behind them. Zhu Yan clearly noticed them too. His expression changed, and he immediately sped up. Hurry up, the underground mall is right ahead. As long as we get inside, we'll be saved. Lin Yue was so cold her lips were purple. She sobbed, Zhou Yan, I can't walk anymore. Zhou Yan looked back and glared at her, a flash of impatience in his eyes. Look at the time. Is this the moment to act spoiled? Lin Yue froze. In the past, Zhou Yan had always been gentle and attentive to her. He would hand her water, carry her bags, and put on a caring, understanding facade in front of me. But now, the apocalypse has just begun, and his patience has already worn completely thin. Lin Yue finally realized that Zhou Yan was never the solid rock she imagined him to be, but it was too late. Half an hour later, they finally appeared outside the entrance. Zhou Yan looked up at the camera and pounded furiously on the outer iron door. Lu Chen, open the door. We're here. Lin Yue looked up too, tears streaming down her face. Lu Chen, it's me. I know you're in there. Please, can you just open the door? I really know I was wrong. I turned on the broadcasting system. With a burst of static, my voice echoed through the speakers. Wrong about what? Lin Yue grasped at it like a lifeline, frantically replying. I shouldn't have forced you to transfer the house to my name. I shouldn't have said those hurtful things. I shouldn't have been so close to Zhou Yan. Lu Chen, as long as you let me in, I'll listen to everything you say from now on. Zhu Yan's face darkened. Yue. But Lin Yue didn't even look at him. She just stared intently at the camera, crying her eyes out. If this were my past life, seeing her like this, my heart would have softened long ago. But now, I only found it incredibly ironic. I spoke up. Lin Yue, if I open this door right now, can you guarantee you won't side with Zhu Yan? Can you guarantee you won't join them in forcing me to hand over my supplies? Can you guarantee that once you're inside, you won't treat this place as public property for all of you? Lin Yue opened her mouth, but couldn't utter a single word, because deep down, she knew very well that if this door actually opened, the first thing on her mind wouldn't necessarily be gratitude toward me, but how to cling to life, how to get Zhou Yan inside too, and how to turn this place into her new safety net. Zhou Yan's expression shifted. He quickly reacted, letting out a cold sneer. Lu Chen, stop trying to drive a wedge between us. It's crawling with monsters out here, and you're hiding in there interrogating us? I looked at him. Zhou Yan, what you really want has never been a way to survive, but the supplies in here. From the moment you found out the location of this underground mall, you weren't thinking about asking for help. You were thinking about how to break in, and how to seize everything inside. Zhou Yan's face completely changed. He dropped the act, bent down to pick up a rock, and hurled it viciously at the camera's protective glass. With a thud, the protective glass merely vibrated, without a single crack. Lu Chen, stop playing God in there. Let me tell you, if you don't open this door today, once I get in, the stuff in there might not be yours for long. Lin Yue's face went pale. She finally understood. Zhou Yan wasn't here to beg for his life at all. He wanted to break the door down and storm in. He wanted to rob the bunker's supplies, and she was just a pawn. Zhou Yan used to force me to open the door. She hurriedly took a step back, looking at Zhou Yan. Yan, you... Didn't you say we were coming to ask Lu Chen to save us? Zhou Yan whipped his head around, all the gentleness on his face completely gone. Look at the situation. Did you really think that just by begging, he'd open the door? Lin Yue was stunned. Zhou Yan sneered. If you hadn't said Lu Chen was soft-hearted, and that he used to listen to you the most, do you think I would have risked bringing you along? Why do you think I protected you this whole way? Because you could lure him into opening the door. As long as that door opens, the supplies inside are a real ticket to survival. Lin Yue stood frozen in place. She had always firmly believed that Zhou Yan truly treated her well, and that at least in times like this, he would protect her. But in the end, she was nothing more than a tool for Zhou Yan to pry open this door. I sat in the monitoring room, tapping lightly on the desk. Sometimes I don't even need to expose the truth myself. They'll tear off each other's masks on their own. Just then a series of growls echoed from afar. A few dark figures had been drawn over by their arguing. I reminded them you have 30 seconds left. Zhou Yan's face paled, and he pounded on the door again. Lu Chen, open the door. Open it right now, and I promise I won't lay a finger on you. I didn't reply. It's already come to this, and he's still putting on an act. Lin Yue's legs gave out, and she collapsed into the snow. She tried to crawl up, but her limbs were frozen stiff. All she could do was cry and look up at the camera. Lu Chen, I'm begging you. I don't want to die. I really know I was wrong. I looked at her, feeling no sense of vindication, nor a shred of pity, only a calm certainty, like dust finally settling. Lin Yue, I gave you chances before, but every time, you chose someone else. This time, I'm choosing myself too. She completely broke down. Lu Chen, please, just give me one more chance. I didn't answer anymore. The dark figures in the distance were closing in. Zhou Yan finally panicked. He glanced back, then eyed the survival bag in Lin Yue's hands. It was the bag I had just tossed out from the outer door's drop slot. Inside were some rations, 2 heat packs, and a map pointing to a temporary shelter. Lin Yue clutched the bag tightly, like it was her last lifeline. Zhou Yan suddenly lunged forward and snatched the survival bag. Lin Yue was dumbfounded. Zhou Yan, what are you doing? Zhou Yan didn't even spare her a glance. He turned and ran for his life. Only then did Lin Yue fully realize that in a life-or-death moment, the only person Zhou Yan wanted to save was himself. She staggered after him, grabbing tightly onto his jacket. Zhou Yan, you can't leave me behind. Zhou Yan turned his head, his face twisted with bulging veins. Get off me. He shoved her hard. Lin Yue tumbled into the snow. The survival bag she had held to her chest had been stolen by Zhou Yan. Lin Yue was stunned. Zhou Yan. That's what Lu Chen gave me. Zhou Yan didn't stop for a single second, turning and sprinting madly toward the corner of the street. Inside were rations, heat packs, and a map to the shelter. It was the only thing that gave them a chance to survive after leaving here. But he didn't even bother to look back at her once. Lin Yue lay sprawled in the snow, watching Zhou Yan's figure fade away. In that moment, it seemed she finally understood. Zhou Yan never wanted to save her. All he wanted were the things that would help him survive. And she was nothing more than a tool he used to try and open this door. She didn't lose to the apocalypse, nor did she lose to the infected. She lost to her own greed and betrayal. Lin Yue struggled to lift her head, looking straight into the camera. She parted her lips, as if she still wanted to say something, but the blizzard was too fierce, and I couldn't hear anything anymore. The surveillance monitor flickered a few times, as several dark figures lunged from the snow. I didn't keep watching. I just turned off that camera feed. A few minutes later, the external microphone picked up nothing but the howling wind. Zhou Yan never texted again, and Lin Yue's chat window would never light up again. Early the next morning, I checked the front door camera again. Outside the riot door, all that remained was the winter coat I had once given Lin Yue, now more than half buried in the snow and ice. I stared at it for a long time, then turned off the screen. It wasn't until this very moment that the hatred weighing on my chest for an entire lifetime finally dissipated completely. That same morning, I pulled up the backup camera system at the street corner to check. Zhou Yan hadn't run very far. After snatching the survival bag, he originally planned to head to the shelter on the map. But he was so terrified of others stealing his stuff that he clutched the bag tightly the whole way. To avoid other survivors, he didn't follow the safe route I had drawn out, but ducked into a closer, narrow alleyway instead. In my past life, that alley was the biggest gathering spot for the infected. On the camera, Zhou Yan had only taken a few steps inside, when several dark figures deep in the alley slowly turned around. He seemed to realize something was wrong, and immediately slammed on the brakes, turning to run. But it was too late. More and more infected monsters swarmed out from the snow and behind abandoned cars, surrounding him. Zhou Yan hugged the survival bag tightly, backing away frantically. But staggering figures had already appeared at the mouth of the alley too. His escape route was completely cut off. On the surveillance screen, he desperately pounded on a nearby rolling shutter door, then turned toward the underground mall. screaming something, but the distance was too far. I couldn't hear him clearly. The next second, the dark figures lunged at him all at once. In the blink of an eye, Zhou Yan's figure was swallowed by the horde of infected. The blizzard quickly blanketed the mouth of the alley, burying his final struggling silhouette. From then on, Zhou Yan never appeared again. I turned off that surveillance screen, and the monitoring room returned to its quiet state. Outside was a raging blizzard, the echoing growls of the infected, the old world that had completely collapsed. But here in my place, the heater was running steadily, and the lights were shining bright. I walked into the kitchen and scooped myself a bowl of hot soup. As I took the first sip, the piping hot broth flowing down my throat into my stomach, I finally truly realized, in this life, I survived. From that day on, no one dared to act like Wang Hai and Zhou Yan, blatantly trying to force me to open the door. Wang Hai was missing, Zhou Yan would never appear again, and Lin Yue had vanished forever in that blizzard. But I knew that didn't mean the danger was over. On the contrary, the true cruelty of the apocalypse had only just begun. After communications were completely cut off, the entire city sank into a dead silence. My phone never received another message. The group chat stopped at the final cry for help, and the signal bars turned into an empty void. For the first 2 days, I would still occasionally turn on my phone to glance at it. Later, I just tossed it into a drawer. This world was no longer one where people could connect through a phone. The first blizzard of the apocalypse lasted for a grueling half-month. For that entire half-month, the sky outside barely ever brightened. The only difference between day and night was a faint, grayish shift on the surveillance screens. Snow piled high on the streets, covered the roofs of cars, blocked the lower-level exits of every building, and buried countless figures who couldn't escape in time along the road. At its coldest, the outdoor temperature dropped below -80 degrees Celsius. Under those temperatures, an ordinary person simply couldn't last outside for long. Half a month later, the blizzard finally weakened a bit. The temperature also rose from rock bottom, slowly creeping up to -40 or 50 degrees. For an ordinary person, this was still a lethal temperature. But at least it gave a small number of survivors a chance to move short distances. During those few days, I gradually figured out the infection patterns of the spores in the snow. This snow didn't make you lose control the second you touched it. If it was just brief contact through layers of clothing, there was still a chance to treat it. The real danger was the melted snow seeping into wounds, the mouth, or nose, or sticking to the skin for a long time. Once black spots appeared on the skin, it meant the infection process had begun. Judging from my past life's experience, the longest incubation period was around 12 hours. Therefore, the first absolute rule I set for the underground fortress was that any outsider had to be quarantined for a full 72 hours, not a minute less. A few times, I saw survivors crawling out of apartment buildings. They wrapped their bodies tightly in bedsheets, covered their shoes in plastic bags, and held crude tools in their hands, wanting to cross the street to the supermarket to find food. But they hadn't gone far when sluggish black shadows began shifting in the snow. Those infected had half their bodies buried in the snowdrifts, normally completely motionless, as if frozen solid. But the moment they sensed the vibration of footsteps, a heat source, or heard the slightest sound, they would lunge straight at anyone passing by. The surveillance feed was quickly obscured by the blizzard. I stopped watching. In the apocalypse, seeing some things too clearly only makes it harder to sleep at night. At first, the infected only chased the living on pure instinct. A few days later, they started becoming more sensitive to sound, vibrations, and heat sources. By the 7th day, the first batch of high-risk infected appeared. Their mobility was noticeably enhanced. One infected, drawn by a heat source, groped its way to the ventilation shaft on the mall's outer wall. When the infrared camera triggered the alarm, I was in the power room doing an inspection. The moment that ear-piercing siren blared, my heart suddenly skipped a beat, not out of fear, but because the memory of my door being breached in my past life came rushing back in an instant. I immediately switched to the camera feed of the ventilation shaft. On the screen, the infected monster stopped by the outer wall, right up against the metal security grate. The next second, it slammed hard into the grate. Bang! The entire ventilation pipe shuddered slightly. I didn't move a muscle, just stared intently at the screen. Bang! A second hit. Bang! A third. The security grate didn't deform at all. The air filtration system showed no abnormalities, and the anti-backflow system was running perfectly. Only then did I slowly breathe a sigh of relief. Thank God I had installed extra soundproofing for the ventilation system early on, along with a heat exchanger and camouflage for the exhaust vent. The air actually being expelled was at a very low temperature, and the noise was suppressed to the absolute minimum. That monster was only attracted by a tiny amount of leaked heat, but it hadn't found the real entrance. In my past life, I didn't even have a real door to keep out human malice. In this life, I built myself a true fortress that can withstand the apocalypse itself. The infected monster lingered outside for a long time. Finally, as if losing its target, it slowly wandered out of the camera's range. Over the next few days, More and more infected were drawn by the heat and low-frequency sound waves of the machinery. Some rammed the doors, some prowled around the outer defensive grates, and some loitered near the entrance. The sound was grating, like someone taking a sharp object and slowly scraping it back and forth against the door. I didn't turn off the cameras, nor did I completely soundproof the place, because I had to get used to the apocalypse. It wouldn't quiet down just because I was scared. Every day, I stuck to a strict routine. Wake up at 7 a.m., check the power, check the fuel, check the water circulation, check the air filtration system, record the outdoor temperature and the monster's movement patterns, then eat, work out, organize the warehouse, and patrol the 3 underground levels. For the first few days, I couldn't sleep well. The slightest noise in the middle of the night would jolt me awake, and I'd stare at the surveillance screens for a long time. Sometimes, I dreamed I was back in my past life. Dreamed of Lin Yue throwing the door wide open. Dreamed of Zhou Yan, leading people to storm in. After waking up, I'd often sit in the dark for a long time. Only after confirming the 3 layers of riot doors were still locked tight, and the power room was running normally, would I finally lie back down. This so-called sense of security doesn't just magically appear because you have supplies. It has to be validated, day by day. Validating that the doors are still solid. Validating that the food is still plentiful. Validating that I won't ever be pushed outside by anyone again. On the 10th day, I planted the first batch of vegetables in the 3rd basement level. Lettuce, scallions, potatoes. When I buried a few tomato seeds into the planting trough, my hand paused for a long time. During the half-year of the apocalypse in my past life, I almost never saw true green. Any edible leaves had long been snatched up completely. Even the grass in the apartment flower beds was dug up and boiled. Back then, a fresh vegetable leaf was rarer than gold. So, when the first tender green sprout poked out of the planting trough, I stood under the grow lights and stared at it for a long time. It was so small, so fragile that a single finger could crush it. But in this world where a sip of hot water could cost a life, this tiny bit of green gave me more peace of mind than a warehouse full of canned goods. Canned food will eventually run out. Fuel will eventually burn away. But as long as seeds can still sprout, this place isn't just a shelter. It's a place where I can truly survive and put down roots. A month and a half later, the survivors outside began to dwindle. At first, there were still people dragging injured legs past, still people lying prone at the door, crying and screaming, still people kneeling under the camera, begging me for a bite to eat. Later on, those sounds grew fewer and farther between. It wasn't that they didn't want to beg for help anymore, but that there weren't many left alive who could even make it here. Late one night, the outside camera caught sight of an old man. He was carrying a battered first aid kit on his back, stumbling and slipping his way to the mall entrance. He didn't pound on the door, he didn't curse at me, and he certainly didn't beg me to let him in. He just leaned his back against the door, pulled a snow-soaked piece of cardboard from his coat, with a few crooked lines written on it. I am a doctor, not infected. I can treat illnesses, just asking for a sip of hot water. I stared intently at the surveillance screen for a long time. That face. I recognized it. In my past life, desperate to find fever meds for Lin Yue, I had bumped into him at an abandoned clinic. The clinic had long been ransacked and stripped bare. I was on the verge of despair, but he pulled out from a drawer in his medical kit the last 2 fever pills and handed them to me. His hands were trembling violently from the cold. The 2 pills were wrapped in a piece of paper, its corners completely frayed. I stood there, stunned. What about you? I'm old, just taking it one day at a time. You're still young. Every life saved is a life earned. Those 2 fever pills ultimately saved Lin Yue's life, but she would never ever know that they were bought with the life of an old man who was already on his last legs. I turned on the external speaker and asked if he had come into direct contact with the snow. The old man looked up, his voice so hoarse it was barely audible. No direct contact. I have frostbite on my arm, but no black spots. I didn't open the door immediately. Instead, I activated the outer buffer zone. The first door cracked open just enough for one person to slip through. After he stepped inside, the outer door immediately sealed shut. Next came the snowblowers, the disinfectant mist, sealing his outer clothes, and dropping down a disposable hazmat suit and a spare winter coat. Temperature check, wound inspection. He was quarantined in the outer buffer zone for 12 hours. During those 12 hours, I only passed him water through the transfer slot, along with dry rations and some basic meds. On the evening of the 3rd day, after confirming he showed no signs of infection, no high fever, and no aggressive tendencies, I finally allowed him into the isolation room on basement level 1. When he saw me, he didn't ask if he could stay. Instead, he looked toward the medical room, his voice very soft as he spoke. Does this place have any usable medicine left? I looked at him. He gave a wry smile. Don't misunderstand. I'm a doctor. When I see medicine, I can't help but think of patients first. I looked at his hunched back and stayed silent for a long time. The apocalypse can turn countless people into demons, but there are always those who remember exactly who they are. From that day on, every time the door opened, There had to be rules. Later, I saved a pair of siblings. When the infected chased them near the mall, the teenage boy was on the verge of collapsing, but he still fiercely shielded his little sister in his arms. When he pounded on the door, he only said one thing: "Save my sister. I don't have to come in." I let them into the buffer zone. After 12 hours of quarantine, both siblings survived. When the boy woke up, he tried to kneel and thank me, but I stopped him. The third person was the repairman who had reminded me about construction safety before the apocalypse hit. When he arrived, he had almost completely lost feeling in one leg. Through the door, he spoke into the intercom. "Boss, I won't cause trouble. All I have on me is this set of tools. If you take me in, I'll fix your pipes and wiring from now on. If not, just give me a piece of paper and point me to a path where I can hide from the blizzard." That's all I ask. I pondered for a long time. Ultimately, I decided to let him into the buffer zone. It took the old doctor 3 days to save his leg. After cleaning the wound, he stayed holed up in the isolation room for a solid week before he could stand up and walk. After passing the critical stage, the repairman helped me reinforce some of the external water pipes and also helped redesign the backup maintenance corridor. From then on, I was no longer alone in the underground fortress. But the rules were also officially established from that day forward. First, anyone entering the living quarters must undergo a full 72-hour quarantine. Second, all supplies must be centrally registered. Absolutely no hoarding for personal gain. Third, no one is allowed near the central control room or the power room without permission. Fourth, no one is allowed to instigate trouble, break the rules, or open any doors without authorization. Violators will be immediately expelled from the fortress. Fifth, the fortress can save people, but it will not risk the lives of everyone else just to save one person. These ironclad rules, I wrote them out in large, clear letters in the most conspicuous spot at the entrance to basement level 1. After reading them, the old doctor only said one thing: "It's better to have strict rules. In chaotic times, a lack of rules is what digs people's graves." 2 months later, the entire city had lost its original shape. High-rise buildings were encased in ice and snow, streets buried under deep snowdrifts. Supermarkets, hospitals, schools, all had turned into hunting grounds for the infected. But inside the underground fortress, things gradually settled into a stable routine. The old doctor cleaned up the medical storage, sorting the medicines by function and expiration date. The teenage boy was in charge of patrolling the outer cameras, while his little sister helped water and tend to the planning area. As for the repairman, he took me to meticulously inspect the drainage system, wall structures, and backup wiring. This underground mall was finally no longer just my personal shelter. It was beginning to transform into a sanctuary where we could put down roots and survive long-term. Later on, there were still occasional survivors passing by the underground mall. Some begged for their lives, some cursed loudly, some tried to pry the doors and break the locks, and some lay outside the door, sobbing and repenting, saying they had robbed others before, and now they finally understood what it felt like to have all hope stripped away. Half a year passed. The endless, freezing blizzard finally began to subside. The sky was still a gloomy gray, the sun like a dust-covered copper coin, hanging suspended behind the thick clouds. The infected hadn't disappeared, but the lucky survivors had begun to re-establish a survival order of their own. On the outskirts of the city, a few survivor bases had gradually popped up. They used abandoned malls as perimeter walls and underground parking garages as shelters from the cold. People also started lighting fires for warmth again, clearing the roads, and scavenging for any usable supplies. I didn't join any of the bases, nor did I throw open the doors of the mall to take everyone in. This underground fortress was a blood-soaked lesson I had paid for with an entire lifetime. I could spare some food for the innocent, I could hand a bottle of clean water to an exhausted child, and I could even allow those who truly followed the rules to take shelter from the blizzard for a night in the outermost buffer zone. But the living quarters, the power room, and the warehouse behind those doors would never, ever be casually open to outsiders, because I understood better than anyone. Kindness can exist in the apocalypse, but it must have clear boundaries. Over the past year, I had seen too many people kneeling and wailing outside my door, and seen too many turn on their own brothers for half a bag of rice. I had seen people, desperate to hoard medicine, ruthlessly abandon their closest loved ones to escape alone. But I had also seen people who would rather endure gnawing hunger, just to give their last bite of food to their family. The apocalypse magnifies human greed to the extreme, but it also elevates the tiny bit of goodwill that hasn't yet died out to the most brilliant, dazzling heights. A year later, I stood in the central control room of the underground fortress. Before me was an entire wall of surveillance screens. On the screens, the city was still buried deep under ice and snow. Abandoned skyscrapers stood silently amidst the white snow. Occasionally, a few monsters would stumble past a street corner, but I was no longer afraid, because behind me were generators running tirelessly, living quarters always glowing with warm light, and a planting room always lush with fresh green vegetables. In my past life, I was shoved out the door of survival. In this life, I stand tall inside the door, protected by 3 layers of riot steel doors, locked tight behind me. The key rests firmly in my hand, and my life is mine alone to decide.